Good morning. In 10th class biology, today we have to study sexual reproduction in flowering plants. We have to know that the reproductive organ of the plant is known as flower, and the flower is made up of four floral parts. And in these parts, we can distinguish this into the two categories: one that is the accessory parts, and one that is the essential parts. Accessory parts, that is the sepals and the petals. Accessory parts, what I am showing here, these are the sepals and these are the petals. Sepals are the outermost greenish wall, and its work is to provide the protection and provide the different shape to the flower. And the petals are the second colorful whole of the flower, and its work, if it is brightly colored, then it results into the attraction of the pollinators, means its main role in the attraction of pollinators. It will be attracting the pollinators towards the flower. That results into the accomplishment of the pollination process. So these are the two accessory parts of the flowers, and these two, the reproductive main essential parts of the flowers, in this structure. This structure is the stamen. The stamen has the two part. The topmost part is the anther, and this is the thread-like structure, that is the filament. And this is the female reproductive part, from this basal ends to the topmost end. This is the stigma, which is rough and sticky. This is the long, hollow, cylindrical structure, which is called a style. And this is the basal swollen end, that is called ovary. So this is the female part, which is called pistillate. In some cases, we can see that the flowers in the plants can be categorized into two categories on the basis of presence of stamen and pistil and the presence of one sex or two sex bodies in the flower. It is said as in the papaya or in the watermelon, only one sex organ is present in the flower. So such type of flower or plants are known as unisexual. If a stamen is present only in the flower, that is called a staminate, that is the male reproductive organ. And the pistil, which is the female reproductive organ, if only pistil is present in the flower, that is called pistillate. But in some category of the flower, that is the hibiscus, that is the mustard, that is the rose, both sex organs, pistil and stamen. Pistil is also known as carpel. Pistil or stamen both are present in the flower. That's why we can say the such type of plants, what is bisexual. We can say this is bisexual. We have to know that for the creation of the new individuals, there is the need of the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma. And from anther to the stigma, there is the need of the transfer of pollen grains. In this way, the houseflies, the honeybees, bumblebees, butterflies, humans, many birds and animals plays very important role in the transfer of this pollen grains from anther to stigma. Even the air currents, the water currents, whatever the other agents that will be playing important role in the transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma. If it is the bisexual flower, and if the transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma is happening in the same flower, that is called self-pollination. That is called self-pollination. And if the transfer of pollen grains from anther of a flower to the stigma of another flower in the same plant body, or to the stigma of another flower of another plant of its own type, of its own species, that is also called cross pollination. After the pollination, when the pollen grain lands over the surface of a stigma, when the pollen grain lands over the surface of a stigma, you can see this figure. When the pollen grain lands over the surface of a stigma, this pollen grains start to germinate. This pollen grain start to germinate so that it can deliver the nucleus to the egg, to the female gamete which is present in the ovule. You know that this pollen grain will be germinating and making a tubular structure which is called pollen tube. This pollen tube will be continuously growing and approaching to the ovary, and inside the ovary to the ovule. And in the ovule, what is found? The female gamete is found, female germ cell is found, where the male gamete is delivered, the nucleus of the male gamete is delivered, and the fertilization takes place. The fusion between the male gamete and the female gamete egg take place, and the process of fusion of male and female gamete is known as fertilization. But still, one thing we can mention here, that when the nucleus comes in the midline of the style of the female pistil, the male gamete divides into two parts. The male gamete and the nucleus of the pollen grain divides into two parts and makes the two male gametes, in which the first male gamete fuse with the egg, that is called fertilization, and the second male gamete fuse with these two polar nuclei, that is called triple fusion. And this triple fusion results into formation of endosperm, which is richly filled with the food materials, which is essential for the further growth of the zygote, which is result of the fertilization between the male gamete and female gamete. After the zygote formation, the zygote will be fed by the nutrition of the food materials richly supplied in the endosperm, that will be making the mass of cells, and finally that will be making the seed. So ovule will develop into the seed, whereas this ovary will be developing into the fruit. And the rest of the part, like this style, like this stigma, like the petals, like the stamen, like the sepals, that will be shrivel off, that will dry and falls off. So only this ovule will develop into seed and this ovary will develop into the fruit. Second thing, if we want that which part of the seed germinates and how the germination of seeds takes place, then one activity is here that you take the seeds of the Bengal gram and you will keep them into the water for a night, and you will keep them into the wet cloth for a day and for 24 hours. You will see that there is germination in this seed, as the two cotyledons are found in the dicots, so there will be germination, and the germination, the lower part, that is called radicle, that will be developing to the root, and this apical part will be developing into the plumule, and that plumule will transform into the shoot, into the stem and the branches. So that's all about the sexual reproduction in the flowering plants. Tomorrow we will discuss the reproduction in human beings. Thank you.